اتهزتش، انا صاحب بيت، انا صوت لا بيسكت ولا بيموت، انا وعد يقين. وعنيا لو اتقفلت ببارود هتفتح جوه عيون ملايين، هتحرر روحهم وتزلزل قلب الزنازين، والورد هيرجع وهيطرح في قلوب تانيين، وساعتها الدنيا هتعرف مين بيحرر مين. احنا اصحاب الارض، احنا السكان الاصليين، وبذور بتمد العاشر جد بتهدف فلسطين. لو عامل نفسك يعني نسيت، انا ما اتهزتش، انا صاحب بيت، انا صوت لا بيسكت ولا بيموت، انا وعد يقين. وعنيا لو اتقفلت ببارود هتفتح جوه عيون ملايين، هتحرر روحهم وتزلزل قلب الزنازين، والورد هيرجع وهيطرح في قلوب تانيين، وساعتها الدنيا هتعرف مين بيحرر مين.
والآن نرحب بنيفين أبو رحمون، عضو مجلس إدارة حملة والمحاضرة والناشطة السياسية، حيث ستقدم لنا الفائز بالجائزة التكريمية للنشاط الرقمي لعام 2023، والتي يهدف مركز حملة من خلالها إلى تكريم جهود المؤسسات والحركات والمجموعات الريادية والناشطين والناشطات الذين نجحوا في توظيف الحملات الرقمية والنشاط الرقمي لخلق تأثير اجتماعي إيجابي. تقدم الجائزة نيفين أبو رحمون، عضو مجلس إدارة حملة والمحاضرة والناشطة السياسية.
And now we welcome Naveen Abu Rahman, a lecturer, politician, and member of Hamla's Board of Directors, where she will announce the winner of the Digital Activism Award for the year 2023. The award aims to honour the efforts of institutions, movements, pioneering groups, and activists who have succeeded in employing digital campaigns and digital activism to serve their field of work to create social impact.
أوكي. مساء الخير للجميع، وأهلا وسهلا فيكم في منتدى فلسطين للنشاط الرقمي. بكل سرور سأقدم لكم من خلال هذه المنصة جائزة أفضل حملة رقمية. في كل سنة يمنح منتدى فلسطين للنشاط الرقمي جائزة أفضل حملة رقمية كإشادة لحملة رقمية فلسطينية نظمت خلال الفترة المنصرمة وامتازت بامتلاكها لمجمل معايير حملات المناصرة الرقمية التي تحدث أثراً. لكننا في هذه السنة التي شهدت حرب إبادة على شعبنا في قطاع غزة، وحرباً شرسة على السردية الفلسطينية وعلى حرية التعبير عن الرأي وإسكات الأصوات المناصرة للحرية والعدالة في فلسطين، من خلال استخدام كل وسائل القمع بما فيها حذف المحتوى الرقمي في وسائل التواصل الاجتماعي والاعتداءات الدموية على الصحفيين والصحفيات وكل من ينقل الحقيقة. في هذه السنة قررنا في لجنة الجائزة ألا نشيد بحملة بعينها، أي بحملة رقمية بدأت وانتهت، بل بنشاط رقمي إعلامي استثنائي ما زال مستمراً ينقل لنا وللعالم قصص الناس من غزة رغم كل ويلات الحرب وجبروت الإسكات. لذا قررنا هذه السنة منح جائزة للنشاط الإعلامي الرقمي، وأن تتقاسم الجائزة منصتان فلسطينيتان بارزتان لعبتا قبل الحرب ومنذ بدايتها، وما زالتا حتى الآن تلعبان دوراً إعلامياً بالغ التأثير في نقل السردية الفلسطينية بأسلوب إنساني وواثق يضع الإنسان والإنسان الفلسطينيين في المركز، ويفسح المجال للصحفيين والصحفيات والمصورين والمصورات الفلسطينيين أن يتعاونوا معاً ويتكاملوا فيما بينهم ليكونوا هم صياغ القصة التي عنا. جائزة النشاط الإعلامي الرقمي لهذا العام تتقاسمها منصة أنتول فلسطين ومنصة فلسطينيات. اخترنا منصة أنتول فلسطين كونها قامت بجهد إعلامي جبار في أعقاب الحرب على غزة، حيث قرر فريق المنصة إطلاق سلسلة منشورات بعنوان إحنا مش أرقام، وثقت قصص الشهداء إيماناً بأن كل شهيد أو شهيدة ممن ارتقوا في هذه الحرب هو أو هي عالم بحد ذاته. لقد دفعت مشاهد الدم والجثث والأشلاء التي غمرت شبكات التواصل الاجتماعي وغمرت قلوبنا أيضاً صناع المحتوى في أنتول فلسطين للبحث عن تفاصيل حياة الشهداء وتخليدهم من خلال توثيق قصصهم، الأمر الذي لاقى تجاوباً كبيراً وتفاعلاً نشطاً وتأثيراً لافتاً، معتبرين أن نقل قصصهم الإنسانية للآخرين هو مسار مساند وداعم للعمل الصحافي الفلسطيني في الميدان الذي يكشف انتهاكات الاحتلال وآثاره المدمرة. حتى اللحظة نجحت أنتول فلسطين في توثيق أكثر من 350 قصة تضمنت شرائح مختلفة من أبناء وبنات شعبنا، ولم تقتصر فقط على غزة، وإنما وثقت أيضاً قصصاً من الشهداء في الضفة الغربية. كل هذه القصص تركت وقعاً كبيراً، ومع الوقت أصبح المنصة مرجعاً للكثير من المؤسسات الإعلامية والمؤثرين في طرح مخرجاتها. فضلاً عن قصص الشهداء المؤلمة، عمدت المنصة على نشر قصص ملهمة للكثير من الشخصيات التي عاشت تحديات الحرب، فأنتجت صوراً وفيديوهات لمتطوعين وفنانين وممرضين وأطباء غزيين يساهمون يومياً في صناعة الأمل. كل التحية لمنصة أنتول فلسطين. وحول المبادرة الثانية، منذ الأيام الأولى لحرب الإبادة على قطاع غزة، أطلقت فلسطينيات حملة غزة تتحدث، وبالاستعانة بفريق واسع من الصحفيات والصحفيين من قلب قطاع غزة، أنتجت فلسطينيات مئات القصص والتقارير عن المجازر والمجاعة وظروف النزوح المأساوية، مع التركيز على قصص النساء والصحفيات والصحفيين والطبيبات والأطباء، ونقلت الشهادات والقصص بلسان أصحابها مع ترجمة حديثهم إلى اللغة الإنجليزية، ونشرته مع كبرى الصفحات الفلسطينية لتحصد ملايين المشاهدات، وصلت حتى اليوم إلى ما يقارب 500 مليون مشاهدة. ومع الاستعانة بأحدث أساليب النشر على منصات التواصل الاجتماعي وتوظيف الذكاء الصناعي ليروي بلسان غزة وبلسان الشهداء والشهيدات ما لم يستطيعوا أو يستطعن روايته قبل استشهادهم. بالإضافة إلى هذا العمل الإعلامي الجبار، عمل فلسطينيات أيضاً على توفير مساعدات مالية وعينية وخيماً للعمل وفرص عمل لمئات الصحفيات والصحفيين في قطاع غزة. كل التحية للفلسطينيات، تستحقن منا كل الإشادة والتقدير. والآن أريد أن أدعو إلى المنصة وفاء عبد الرحمن، مؤسسة ومديرة مؤسسة فلسطينيات ورئيسة تحرير شبكة نوى، نسوية من مواليد غزة وتحمل شهادة ماجستير في التنمية السياسية البديلة من هولندا. ندعوها لنستمع إلى كلمتها في هذه المنصة.
مساء الخير، مساء الخير، وشكرا جزيلا نيفين. شكرا لحملة الشريكة والصديقة، شكرا لمنتدى فلسطين الرقمي على هذا الاعتراف الجميل بما قدمه الصحفيين والصحفيات أو الصحفيون والصحفيات في قطاع غزة. عندما حدثني وأخبرني العزيز نديم ناشف عن هذه الجائزة، أنا الحقيقة بكيت. هذا تكريم ليس لفلسطينيات، هذا اعتراف ليس بعمل فلسطينيات. وحين نقول غزة تتحدث، هي تتحدث عبر صحفيات وصحفيين موجودين خلف التقرير، موجودين خلف الكاميرا، قد لا نعرفهم بالاسم، ولكنهم عملوا منذ اليوم الأول، قدموا الرواية كما قلت. إذن هو تكريم لهؤلاء الصحفيات والصحفيين. التكريم مميز أعزائي وعزيزاتي لأنه يأتي من مؤسسة محلية. الاعتراف بهذا العمل من مؤسسة محلية هو أهم كثيرا من الجوائز التي قدمت للصحفيين والصحفيات في قطاع غزة من مؤسسات دولية. أن نعترف بهذا الجهد، أن نتعاون معا، أن نبعث برسالة مهمة لهؤلاء الذين يعملون تحت الإبادة الجماعية، لنقول لهم نحن معكم ومعكن، نحن نسمعكم ونعرف المعاناة التي تمرون بها. هي هدية للصحفيين والصحفيات اللواتي ارتقوا بفعل هذا الاحتلال لأكثر من 150 صحفي وصحفية وعامل وعاملة في القطاع الإعلامي. نحن تحديدا نهديها لمجموعة من الصحفيات والصحفيين الذين واللواتي ارتقينا خلال هذا العدوان: هبة العبادلة، آيات خضورة، آلاء الهمس، سعاد سكيك، علا لبد، حنين القشطان، آمنة حميد، علا الدحدوح، وأيضا للصحفيين رشدي السراج، وللمختفيين قسريا نضال الوحيدي وهيثم عبد الواحد. نصر على الأسماء كي لا تتحول الصحفيات ولا يتحول الصحفيون إلى مجرد أرقام. هي أيضا اعتراف بجهد عال ل 58 صحفي وصحفية عملوا مع فلسطينيات في غزة تتحدث، 10 صحفيين و48 صحفية على رأسهم زميلتي وصديقتي منى خضر، إسلام الأسطل، شيرين خليفة، مراح الوادية، آلاء أبو عيشة، وأيضا زميلي براء القاضي. إذن هي هدية لكل هؤلاء، نعترف بكل هذا الجهد وبكل الواقع الأليم الذي تعملون من خلاله. هي تحية جميلة من حملة، تحية جميلة من المنتدى، منتدى فلسطين. نقول شكرا ونرفع القبعات لكل صحفي وصحفية يعملون ولا زالوا يعملون في قطاع غزة رغم كل شيء. شكرا لحملة، المجد للشهداء والشفاء للجرحى والجريحات، وإن شاء الله نلتقي بهم وبهن في قطاع غزة الحبيب، وهو حر كما كل فلسطين حرة وآمنة. شكرا جزيلا.
نعم، شكرا لك وفاء عبد الرحمن على هذه الكلمة المؤثرة فعلا والدافئة والطيبة. يعني نقدر جدا هذه المشاعر، ويعني نفتخر بهذا العمل الكبير، ويعني نتمنى لكم الاستمرار أكثر وأكثر. يعني الآن أيضا أدعو إلى المنصة نوال سعد، مركزة مشاريع في أنتول فلسطين، فلتتفضل مشكورة.
مرحبا نيفين، شكرا جدا جدا على المقدمة فيما يتعلق بأنتول فلسطين، وكمان شكرا جدا على هاي الجائزة اللي عن جد بتعني لنا كمنصة حاولت بقدر المستطاع إنها تناضل وتساند قطاع غزة أو فلسطين ككل بطريقتنا الخاصة اللي بعيدة شوي عن المؤسسات وعن كيف عم بيتم نشر الشهداء، صور الشهداء، ويعني تعال نقول الدم والأشلاء والجثث وكل هاي الأمور. حاولنا بطريقتنا ننشر عن قصص هدول الشهداء ونحكي عنهم من بداية العدوان على قطاع غزة. ويعني مع بداية العدوان ونحن بس قررنا نعمل هاي المبادرة أو هاي السلسلة من القصص، بصراحة كنا نحن بنعمل السيرش وبنحاول ندور على قصص الشهداء، بس تفاجأنا إنه الأهالي والأصدقاء والأصحاب عم بيبعتوا قصص أبنائهم زي كأنهم متعطشين لا ينحكى قصة هدول الشهداء، ما يكونوا مجرد صورة أو رقم. يعني بتعرفي دائما نشرات الأخبار بتقول 7 من عائلة كذا، 10 من عائلة كذا، حصيلة الشهداء لليوم 100 200 300، ما في ذكر تفاصيل وحياة هدول الأشخاص. فتفاجأنا بكمية المسجات والرسائل من أهلهم، وكان لنا جدا جدا مهم ننشر ونحكي، ولقينا إنه في صدى واسع ووصلت لكتير كتير كتير ولمست كتير أشخاص، وصلت لملايين الناس اللي شاركت هذا المحتوى. بالإضافة إلى إنه قديش كان صعب علينا نحن كفريق أنتل فلسطين إنه نحن نوثق هاي القصص، اللي أنا بنت قطاع غزة ومعظمهم من يعني مجموعة كبيرة، مش معظمهم، مجموعة كبيرة من هدول الشهداء اللي وثقنا قصصهم كانوا من أصدقائي والناس اللي بنعرفهم واللي بنمرق عليهم باليوم يوم، يعني آيات خدورة وهبة العبادلة وخالد وصلاح جد الله وغيرهم كتير كتير كتير. كان علينا جدا صعب ونحن بنحكي وبنكتب عنهم، بس كان جدا مهم نقول إنه هدول كان لهم حياة، هدول الأشخاص كان لهم حياة. عائلة آلاء أبو قاسم اللي استشهدت تقريبا 6 أشخاص من عائلتها، اللي هي صديقة شخصية إلي، يعني فكان جدا صعب إن أنت توثق ناس تعرفهم غير الشهداء الآخرين، اللي كان عن جد جدا جدا محزن وصعب علينا. وكمان مهم أحكي إنه لكل الصحفيين والمصورين اللي ساندونا كمان بنشر القصص وبتصوير في قطاع غزة رغم كل الظروف اللي كانت محيطة فيهم، بس كانوا جدا داعمين وجدا بالميدان طول الوقت، وبيساعدونا إنه نحن كمان نوصل هذا الصوت بطريقة مختلفة عن كيف وسائل الإعلام المحلية عم تنشر. شكرا كثير كثير على هاي الجائزة، كثير بتعني لنا، لأنه بتثبت لنا إنه نحن وصلنا للهدف اللي بدنا إياه، وأكيد مستمرين نكمل هيك.
نعم. يعني كل الشكر لك نوال، أيضا سعد مركزة مشاريع في أنتول فلسطين، شكرا على هذه الكلمة الدافئة واللافتة والطيبة وتعني لنا الكثير. يعني شهدائنا فعلا مش أرقام. كل التمنيات لكنا في الاستمرار والنجاح، وليبقى عمل المؤسسات يعني فلسطينيات وأنتول فلسطين رافعة في تعزيز سردية شعبنا من غزة وفلسطين إلى العالم. كل التحية للجميع، يعطيكم العافية.
والآن ننتقل إلى جلستنا الأخيرة لليوم تحت عنوان الذكاء الاصطناعي في الأمن والحركات الاجتماعية. كيف تم تسليح تكنولوجيا الذكاء الاصطناعي ضد المجتمعات في الولايات المتحدة؟ نرحب بالسيدة توانا بيتي، والناشطة في مجال العدالة الاجتماعية، وأيضا جرانات كيم المديرة الحالية للحملات في Empower Change، والبروفيسورة ليلي إيراني الأستاذة المشاركة في قسم الاتصالات وعلوم الحاسوب في جامعة كاليفورنيا سان دييغو. سيدير الجلسة إريك سايب، منسق الحملات في الولايات المتحدة لدى مركز حملة، حيث يعمل أيضا على بناء شبكة مناصرة واسعة للحقوق الرقمية الفلسطينية في الولايات المتحدة.
And now to our final session, Artificial Intelligence in Security and Social Movements. How has AI technology been weaponized against communities in the United States? We now welcome Tawana Petty, a social justice organizer, poet, author, and facilitator, Granat Kim, the campaign's director at Empower Change, and Professor Lily Arani, Associate Professor of Communication and Computer Science at University of California, San Diego. The session will be moderated by Eric Sipe, Hamle's national organizer in the United States, working to build a broad base of support for Palestinian digital rights within the United States.
Thank you very much, and welcome to our session. Thank you for all of those joining us for the last session of our first day of the Palestine Digital Activism Forum. This year's conference theme is around AI's revolutionary promises, but discriminatory realities. And I think that that is really an apt introduction for this topic as well. So many of the technologies being implemented in our communities today are introduced under the guise of safety and security, but we know that they are just really weaponized against social movements and oppressed communities to allow the state to increase its surveillance capabilities and corporations to increase their profits. I would also like to bring us back to Dr. Timnit Gebru's earlier remarks today, where she reminded us that none of us are free until all of us are free. And so many of the technologies that we'll be talking about during this session have their roots in the development of Palestine and are then exported to the United States and all around the world, clearly reminding us of the interconnected relationship between oppressed communities globally. So with that in mind, it's really my true pleasure to be in conversation today with Granat Kim, Tawana Petty, and Dr. Lily Irani. And I'm just so excited to hear what you all have to say about this important topic. And I would love to start the conversation off by allowing the three of you to just kind of ground us in some of the work that you have done around these issues historically, so that we can kind of understand what some of the most pressing issues have been in the recent past. And Granat, I will start with you.
Hi, thanks so much. So I've been working on these kinds of issues for several years now, and I wanted, starting with dropping Any Vision, which was an Israeli facial tech recognition that Microsoft was adopting. So that was one campaign, and then I joined Empower Change and began working on ShotSpotter technology, which is basically surveillance technology hidden as a security measure that monitors Black and Brown communities primarily with microphones. So it's a natural fit for Empower, since it's a Muslim organizing nonprofit that basically came out of the anti-terror work, the surveillance of Muslims in the United States, even before 9/11. And Muslims have been the focus of billion-dollar counterterrorism efforts in this country. So that is my background and why I'm here, and excited to get into it with you all.
Oh, sorry about that. Really, you pass it off to you, and you can tell us a little bit about your previous work as well.
Sure. So yeah, I work at UC San Diego, which is a gigantic research university, but I used to work in tech at Google before that. And so in San Diego, I've organized in a community group called Tech Workers Coalition. And one of the, like how I got my start in Tech Workers Coalition was actually supporting the Google workers who were organizing inside their company to get the company to drop a contract for AI that was supposed to be used on US military drones. My family is from Iran, and I recognize this technology as something that would primarily be used in places where my family and my cousins and a lot of our cousins here in this forum are from. So I organized an academic solidarity petition. And then in San Diego, there was a project, the city bought a 3,000 smart streetlight camera and microphone network that they installed all over the city. And so we spent 4 years fighting that technology, trying to build big community coalitions, showing why lots of different communities do not want to waste their money on this and do not want to be targeted by this. So yeah, that was an example of these kinds of tracking and surveillance technologies just coming right into our own neighborhoods. And then most recently at UCSD, we've been learning so much from our badass student organizers, but there's been you could just see all the surveillance infrastructure coming up around the student protests on campus, and you could see exactly how students are being targeted and for punishment, just for organizing, just for resisting. And UCSD, the university I work at, also builds a lot of these deadly border and surveillance technologies. And so our student activists actually just led a tour of the campus, pointing to labs that are producing these kinds of technologies. So there's a lot of ways where I'm trying to help us collectively fight these infrastructures.
Thank you so much for that. And it's so important to remember the role of students and to oftentimes take the lead from students in these moments. Tawana, can I pass it off to you? And could you please share a little bit about your previous work?
Yes, thank you. So I was reminded this week that I've been on this drumbeat since around 2009 when I wrote a very public resistance poem to the digital conversion in the United States, and it kind of just made me sad. But honestly, for more than a decade, I have been engaged in pushing back on the conflation of surveillance with safety and coercion and consent. I've also been engaged in the over decade-long chorus of voices that have been pushing for the understanding that data is not neutral. I've been pushing back against police use of facial recognition technologies, as well as other forms of mass surveillance in Detroit and beyond. And over the years, I've gotten really clear that we have to move beyond just addressing computational and statistical biases, but we have to get really real about the ways that human cognitive biases have been influential in advancing this AI, generative AI, artificial general intelligence future. So understanding that white tech billionaires who are pushing for an AGI future don't have our marginalized and oppressed groups as part of that future. So my advocacy is based on the knowledge that we're only useful for as long as we can feed their data systems and contribute to their free labor. And finally, I'll say I love that you referenced Dr. Gibru. Her recent paper, The Terceral Bundle, Eugenics and the Promise of Utopia Through Artificial Intelligence, it must be engaged with if we're going to seriously struggle towards a more humane and just technological world. And so I've taken on that as part of my anti-racism organizing and social justice organizing in this realm.
Thank you so much, Tawana. And I would just encourage everyone to please look up Tawana's art. I think it's so important to bring art into these spaces as well, and there's not enough. So just encourage the audience to look up Tawana's art. Before I move to the next round of questions, I would just encourage the audience, if you have questions along the way, please go ahead and use the question feature and we will try to get to as many of those towards the end of our discussion as possible. But moving now to our next round of questions, it seems like every day there's a new article that comes out about some sort of technology that the corporations are really excited about, that is going to be the next thing that changes society, and then the next day there's another article about how it's being misused and mistreated. And when we're in this sort of space right now with such vast technological advancement and oftentimes being weaponized, I'm wondering if you could just comment on what some of the biggest risks are that you see currently, or maybe not necessarily currently playing out, but in the near future playing out. So Granted, I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's very concerning to me working on ShotSpotter to see that this technology by Sound Thinking has at least one exclusive relationship with an Israeli drone company called Aerobotics. And I'm just going to use the names that I know because honestly, they change their names about every 6 months to a year in order to deflect. And so, just forget about that. We know who they are. And so I think we just need to look at that and look at how they are often, it seems, 2 or 3 steps in front of us. So we're fighting ShotSpotter, which is a racist technology that is overwhelmingly in Black and brown and poor communities, 70%. They've been Wired just dropped a dime on them. And so now we have the locations, right? And so we just need to look at like what they're looking at. Their universe is a bunch of drones that are going to go out after they get a ShotSpotter, a horrifically bad microphone-based technology that we don't even know. We can't even ask them, what are they hearing? What are they picking up while they're monitoring the communities that we're in and we care about? And then they're already making their relationships with these drone companies. They already have their partnerships with people like Eric Adams in New York, with the Texas governor. They're already making these relationships. So we have to stay, we have to just keep doing our research and keep being vigilant around what they're doing, because they have a vision of a security state that is often driven by what Israel is doing. They have, I don't want to live in a dystopian hellscape. I don't think most people do. And so we have to work, from what they're doing and just honor all the organizing, honor all the work that's being done, and also just stay aware. I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's like they have something planned for us, right? And when I say us, I say the most impacted people, and they have that plan and they don't care about us. And so by saying, oh, they're violating our privacy, it's much deeper and horrific than that. So I don't mean to be crazy, but they would like an unpersoned drone to be able to go and fight crime with a robot dog. I'll shut up.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And I don't think you need to. I don't think you need to be quiet at all. I think that it's really important to be speaking really clear-throated about these issues because the risks are very real. So with that, Lily, how do you see the risk landscape right now?
It can be hard to kind of keep up with all the ways that people talk about AI and technological change. And frankly, I actually, it's like, I don't know what the new AI models are. It's like, I studied computer science. Like I know enough basics, but like my co-organizer, Khalid Alexander, who founded Pillars of the Community here in Southeast San Diego, he said something, history is the best way to tell the future. So in our community coalition, people are looking at these new technologies like smart streetlights or drones or robot dogs, and they're asking, what has our Muslim community's experience with the FBI already been? They've been infiltrating our mosques. They've been trying to get our doctors and our school counselors to spy on us and report us for being radicalized. What are Black communities like already knowing about and experiencing? You know, that their neighborhoods are like occupied by police, and now ShotSpotter is a way of letting the police occupy their neighborhood without having their physical bodies there. Or as Samni Burton's book, Tip of the Spear, talks about, like, prisons and policing is not just a way of dealing with people who, you know, don't have work, you know, as Ruth Gilmore has really powerfully argued, but it's also been a way of identifying and isolating like the lead kind of activists and movements. And when I look at UCSD, that is exactly what's happening. Like, you know, the student encampments, you know, staff and police were there every day, taking pictures of them, sending suspension notices that it evaded any kind of due process, told them they couldn't go to a class, told them they're probably going to get kicked out of housing. And they were isolating and, you know, trying to kind of stress out the lead, you know, the lead people who are kind of getting us organized for our collective liberation. So there's the risks and harms of, like, you know, what everyone's talking about, you know, people being over policed and their lives being made into like a punishment bureaucracy hellscape where due process is the punishment in like a liberal democracy. But, you know, there's also in this movement moment that the function of these technologies will be to repress those of us who are in these spaces, or anybody who wants to challenge power, whether it's labor organizers, Muslim organizers, anti-colonial organizers, anti-racist organizers who challenge white supremacy.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think it's so important in these moments to look back to the past. And I mean, especially in this country, a history of COINTELPRO targeting the Black community, to student activists in the Vietnam War and the fight against South African apartheid, to so many other examples that we're seeing history repeat itself just with scarier technologies now. So yeah, thank you for that framing. Tawana, how are you thinking about this current risk landscape currently?
Thank you. Of course, I touch and agree with everything that's been previously said. I'm also thinking a lot about the impact on our critical thinking, which is happening. I saw a viral post about some elder 90-year-olds who were, image went across social media sharing that there were like 4 quadruplets who were celebrating their birthday. And on the face, it seemed harmless that folks couldn't recognize that was an AI generated image. However, these are the technologies that law enforcement are using. And so, although it might be embarrassing to not recognize an image as not being a real person, the fact that this same technology can misidentify a person by law enforcement, and someone who looks like someone from an AI generated image could end up incarcerated. And so, in addition to the critical thinking and the flooding of misinformation or disinformation, I'm also thinking a lot about our duty to resist mass surveillance and coercive tactics that funnel us into these systems. We have a duty to struggle against the gamification of the surveillance states, to use the words of Dr. Safia Noble, and challenge the ways that these technologies offer conveniences to some while pervasively targeting others. So I feel like we have a duty to opt out of surveillance whenever we can opt out, before we no longer have any options to opt out. Dr. Chris Gilliard talks a lot about luxury surveillance and how these conveniences, like if you go through the airport and you still have an option to opt out of a face recognition scan, but many people don't. They just go ahead with it because they want the convenience of traveling, quote unquote, what they consider to be freely. But the more we normalize these technologies and don't resist their pursuit of omnipotence, the more we end up in a panopticon where we're all surrounded by surveillance technologies and have no further rights to privacy.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that's such an important point, that really our freedoms and our livelihoods are eroding around us due to these technologies, and it doesn't have to be that way. And I think that's a really great segue into what I want to talk about next. But before I move us into our next round of questions, I just want to remind the audience, if you do have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A function, and we'll try and get to as many of those questions as possible. But yeah, moving to our next question, I would love to hear from you all what you think the role not only of civil society, but of academia, of social movements, and of individuals is right now to try to push back against this erosion of our right to privacy and to this encroaching on our freedoms. So with that in mind, and thinking kind of through what you hope for the future, what you hope from civil society, social movements, academia, and individuals kind of writ large. Granite, can we start off with you?
Yeah, I wanted to connect with this concept of right to privacy, and because for me, it's a little bit more than right to the right to privacy. I think we need to push back, but I think we need to look at like what happens when tech that has been trained on white faces has been, even vocal recognition, and in Black and brown and poor neighborhoods. Like, this is about, Michael Williams in Chicago, a 65-year-old Black man picking someone up in a ride and then getting convicted based on a ShotSpotter audio detection of a sound nearby where his car was driving. And then he was incarcerated for a year before the judge threw it out and said, there's nothing, but this man, he lost a year of his life, and he also wanted to kill himself. It was horrific. And this is something that, he was like, how is this happening? Adam Toledo, a 13-year-old Latinx boy, was, a ShotSpotter alert went, and it sends police in, like, sort of guns blazing, and, shot him because who knows why, right? He was near an alert. So it's not just, for me, it's like, it's important to look at the privacy and protecting your data and being vigilant in that way, but also just like what the impact of this is, that people who are already marginalized and policed in horrific ways are going to end up in prison because of these technologies. And so I want to, yes, rights and pushing back and stopping it is really important. And also just like we have to support the community organizers who are working in Chicago and saying, like, no, we can't do this. And then they did do, and so in answer to your question in terms of the what we can do as civil society and looking at and besides not participating in it as much as we can and exceptionalizing, if we're not part of these communities, it's like, this is not the world we want to live in. And we need to keep that in a center of our conversation as like, this is not the world we want to live in for our communities, our neighbors. And it's not that I want to live on a farm or anything, but I want us to work with all the tools we have with the Lily wants to live on a farm. Sorry. I kind of do too, but I don't, but also I want to not feel like I can personally, do everything I need to do, shut off my camera, opt out of things. I think we need to do that. And we also need to, look at the most impacted people who, like in Palestine, look at what's happening in Palestine and see that these technologies are going to impact the people with the least rights and the most surveilled people in this country. So I think the challenge is making sure that we're all going to be impacted differently, like people knowing we're going to be impacted differently and pushing back in a way where we're using flawed technology, and it's not just flawed, it's racist technology.
Yeah, I think that there's so many good points to latch on there, granted. So thank you for kind of grounding us and encouraging us to think past just a framework of right to privacy, definitely, and thinking through the ways that these are really impacting communities. Lily, I'd love to hear from you, and feel free to mention why you want to live on a farm, but also please, as an academic, as somebody that has been organizing in movement spaces, I would love to hear your perspective on how we move forward from here and what you would hope.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, just in terms of living on a farm, like as somebody who grew up thinking computers were really cool, and I always really enjoyed playing with them and making websites for people and just like building worlds, with the logic of it, I understand the appeal of, these technologies that are becoming an infrastructure of repression and dispossession. Um, but also, yeah, I think it's not so much the living on the farm, but it's more like recognize. I've been thinking like I've been like learning more of my history of like, Black liberation movements in the 60s and civil rights movements. And I guess they had not only people who were protesting and organizing boycotts, but also I think they had a network of like food producers and healers. And if our movements are going to be sustained in the long term, like we need to have all the things that we need to live in a somewhat autonomous way. And people who touch plants and raise children know a lot that is actively kind of shut out of a lot of STEM and computing education. So that's some of what's involved in wanting to farm for me. It's not necessarily living on a farm, but producing food for my community and like knowing how to cultivate life. In terms of, what more we can do to keep our community safe, I mean, honestly, like I wish Tawana had gone before me, because in San Diego, we are often looking to what's happening in Detroit with her organizing around getting people to think about the ways that the term public safety, it gets used by, like in our city councils, by our government, it's been equated with police. But if you ask people, I went to this amazing workshop organized by Asian Solidarity Collective. Cala Mendoza, an activist, came to help organize it. And they asked us to imagine, like, get into your body, imagine like where you feel safe. Imagine what kinds of things are happening that create that sense of safety. Like, who are you with? What are the kinds of spaces that are there? What are the kinds of resources that are there? Nobody's like the police. People are like, a library, flowing water, like a healing space, like hugs, and so that workshop was a very powerful thing. And so we've been taking kind of leadership from Tawana and her crew from a distance and trying to kind of bring about some of that like embodied like cultural awareness like collectively that we need. So I think one of the things that after 3 years of fighting surveillance in San Diego, where you're just always like fighting the police, fighting the government, talking about all the bad things that are going to happen, like we need to organizations and institutions and just like everyday awareness of our care practices so people can resist calling the police, so they don't kind of think like, oh, so when the police say the shot spotter's coming so that we can deal with school trauma based on like gun threats, like we have like an immediate way of resisting those claims because we know how to create safety for each other. In terms of academia, like one of the things I would say, like, following Ruha Benjamin, if we're in the social sciences or the humanities, like we don't necessarily, oftentimes, like we don't need more data and we don't need more studies to show us why this stuff is bad. Like that knowledge is already like in the testimony of communities who are dealing with these technologies and the kind of institutional practices on the front lines. So like, what can we be doing to amplify the voices of those communities where we are? What can we do to like tactically both like lend our academic imprimatur to strengthen their claims if we're involved in movement fights with them, while also like deconstructing the hierarchical idea that as academics we like actually know more about anything, because that's also a very violent idea. If we're more on like the tech side, if you're like a computer scientist or an AI person, I would say, like, you know, we see a lot of like AI for good kinds of like funding and, you know, conferences, and, you know, the tech industry is very clever in how they spread their funding around to support and amplify voices that can drown out like the conversations that we're having. So, hey, like if you feel connected to computing and you want to build things, like you don't need to like let Google publicize you and like get free legitimacy for like these devastatingly like data thirsty infrastructures that require the free labor of our communities, like Tawana said. You know, do whatever you can to kind of resist the legitimacy of the industry, and don't kind of amplify AI for good efforts or get yourself used or co-opted for that. Because as Meredith Whitaker said, there's a kind of critical academic industrial complex where like the tech industry funds both like the AI for good, like let's discuss like what that could be, and then also they fund the like legitimate academic debate on like bias or ethics or whatever that happens in spaces where communities can't be. It happens in spaces where like our kind of solidaristic struggles are not strengthened in any way. It's actually like those spaces of like academic critical knowledge production are often built to isolate us from like where we actually need to be to fight for our own liberation, because we live with these technologies. We are also going to be repressed by them in different ways as workers, as people in community. I also wanted to talk a little bit about labor unions, because we're building a labor center at UCSD. As a tech worker, you know, I was never part of a union until I went to grad school and became part of UAW 2865, now UAW 4811, on strike across the University of California. That labor union, our academic workers are on strike across the University of California because they recognize that the university calling the police on them for free speech activities threatens everybody's freedom. And the calling of the police is like preceded and like also extended through the use of the surveillance tech that we're talking about. So, you know, if you're involved in a labor union, like how do you like start conversations about how AI and data analytics, data collection is like showing up in your workplace? You know, who controls that data? Who controls what kind of technology comes in? Should the manager have control over that technology? Should the manager have control over that data? Or should workers actually have a voice in like shaping and structuring those technologies that are coming into the workplace? Even though that seems kind of distant from the conversation right now, it's like an immediate way to start a conversation about who controls technology in a way that like hopefully people like understand that like their managers aren't the ones who know how to do the job that they're doing best. And then if you're in labor, like connect the questions of tech in the workplace to tech in the neighborhood. We know like the, you know, targeting of immigrants is a way of controlling workers by making some workers afraid to like claim their rights or speak up about bad stuff that's going on. We know we know that like workers are full people in community, and their community members might be targeted by these technologies if they're in communities that are occupied by police. So like I feel like we need to, like the coalition spaces that I'm in, I feel like we need like labor and like its kind of depth of organizing in order to like keep making us stronger in these fights. And kind of going back to the community and civil society piece, you know, if you're in an organized group in your community, like, are there other groups where you could build coalitions to target like specific surveillance tech or practices that are happening in your community? Also, like, you know, organize teach-ins about surveillance and about technology. Even if you don't feel like you're the expert on tech, like it's fine. Like, take a video like 18 Million Rising's like digital security for activists video. It's like 45 minutes. Get a room or a house or something, watch it together, and then just talk about what you learn. Go find like a local like weirdo computer scientist that kind of gets it, and like they can come and like answer any questions that come up. But also some of the questions are going to be in your community. For us, like the teach-ins have been like one way of building the surveillance conversation across different activist groups that maybe are focused on different issues and extending coalition. For those of us who are in Muslim or Middle Eastern communities, there's a lot of tech workers and engineers among us, but they're not necessarily used to thinking about how the work that they're doing in their industry is connected to the oppression and repression of our communities through Islamophobia and this kind of activist repression. So, help them understand, like, get the truth about like what's going on in their companies, like get them involved in these tech teach-ins and your community organizing. And then also for my Middle Eastern brothers, sisters, and siblings, like I would say, at least for those of us, I think I would say in the US and in Europe, recognizing and fighting anti-Blackness in our communities, because like a lot of people come from the Middle East. There's a history of colonialism where there's a kind of sense of like, oh, I don't know, we've been made bad to feel like brown people, like Arabs, like Iranians, whatever. But we don't always investigate how that lets us get played and co-opted for white supremacy where we're living. And so, there's a lot of anti-Blackness, at least in the United States where I live, like in the media, and who gets portrayed as responsible for crime, for like what is the backstory that leads to the thing that gets put on TV as crime. And that's getting weaponized to also get our communities to buy into surveillance, and to also weaponize to get us to be forces of oppression on, Black communities in the United States. So we have to fight that head on where we see it, and learn through being in struggle together.
Thank you. I also am a former UAW 2865 member when I was a grad student as well, and I think it's so important to point to labor's role in all of this. But so many great nuggets of wisdom there, and how great that the person who you take the lead from can follow you in answering this question. So, Tawana, I'd love to hear from you on what your take is on how all of our different communities can come together to push back against these problematic trends that we see.
Ooh, that's hard to follow, and thank you so much. I will say, first I'll start off saying that when I traveled to Gaza in 2015, and I asked the organizers on the ground, what can I do to support the Palestinian cause? I was told to liberate Black people in America, and that it would have a ripple effect on the ways that Palestinians are treated in Palestine. And so that was what I was told on the ground in Palestine. And I've understood my role much more clearly since I've returned home. But I will specifically say that, I want to say, as someone who now runs a nonprofit, first, I want to say that I think we have to ensure that we don't allow the ways that civil society, I'm using quotes, is being defined more recently to include mostly well-funded nonprofits, which can oftentimes exclude our neighbors and grassroots organizers who are on the front lines of experiencing these technologies without the resources. And so they're often not invited into discussions about our AI future. So we have to make sure that our neighbors are included, and that the ways that Grant speaks sometimes determines the way we define ourselves doesn't create another form of marginalization. That being said, I want to use I statements in this final question. And so specifically, in addition to pushing back against police use of facial recognition technology and organizing around other surveillance technologies, and creating art and exhibitions to contribute to critical thinking and highlight lived experiences under mass surveillance, I've also advocated for legislation and bans, hosted town hall meetings, press conferences, participated in many, many forms of visionary resistance. And in some other ways, I've contributed to this work by co-authoring a digital defense playbook with our data bodies, a consentful tech curriculum with Una Lee of the Consentful Tech Project, a deconflating surveillance with safety zine, which included various artists from across the globe and their lived experiences of living under surveillance, including a Palestinian poet. This zine was distributed at some of the campuses who have been organizing against the genocide in Palestine. And so deeply honored that happened. And finally, I've contributed to the first edition and now the upcoming second edition of the Centering Racial Equity Throughout Data Integration Toolkit, and was recently humbled and honored to contribute an essay to the newly released book, Resisting Borders and Technologies of Violence, as well as co-founded a local magazine called Riverwise Magazine, where we issue special edition surveillance issues and distributed tens of thousands of copies. And so that theme was Detroiters want to be seen, not watched. And so the reason why I wanted to name all those things was because the resources are there. I've studied others. I've contributed my voice into creating materials. And I encourage anyone who has a voice, we all have a voice in this struggle, and they all need to be heard. And we should be putting them out into the world, whether it's organizing 5 or 6 people in your living room to have a discussion about what it means to be safe, like was just referenced, whether it's calling a press conference, whether it's showing up at your city government meeting, whether it's making sure that you're vocal using these technologies and platforms like social media. But what we cannot afford to do is be silent right now in a situation where so many people are being targeted and tracked. I live in a panopticon, honestly, in the city of Detroit. There's mass surveillance all over the city, at laundromats, at gas stations, at public housing. Israeli-funded company just laid a digital highway in front of a massive $950 million tech hub that's being built based off of Silicon Valley in Detroit. And so they're modeling all these ways to further oppress and marginalize our communities. And we have to be very vocal, despite the fear and pressure that come with being sometimes a standalone voice. And so I would say that it doesn't take a mighty voice to speak out, but it does take a voice. And so whether it's you or it's 10 of you, we have a duty to struggle for our collective humanity, and for our safety not to be conflated with surveillance.
Thank you so much for those powerful words and for the direct connection between the community you're living in and Israeli developed tech, and also for a great reference to the Resisting Borders book that Lily also has on her bookshelf there. I highly recommend that for folks. It was referenced a couple times today, and I think it's really a great piece. So now we'll move to questions from the audience. We've received quite a few, so thank you all. We will try to get through as many of these as possible. But this first question, I want to give all of you a chance to answer, maybe in an abbreviated form, so we can get to some of the other questions. But I think it's a really pressing question because of the experience of so many leaders in the solidarity movement right now. So I'll just read what one of our audience members has written. It says that we mentioned the tip of the spear and utilization of the incarceration to target and isolate movement leaders. Can you talk a little bit about how some of the technologies that are commonly used to do this and the ways that the new technologies are taking the tactics of COINTELPRO into this century to try to more aggressively repress movements? And then what can organizers and activists do to keep fighting but stay safe? So obviously a huge question, but I think it's really pressing right now in the face of the international solidarity movement for Palestine. So maybe we'll start with Granite and go around and do another round.
Can someone else start? I'd like to think about this for a minute if someone else has a quick.
Yeah, no problem at all. Lily, do you want to start us off?
I definitely don't have the answer, but I can talk a little bit about things that were happening around the encampment at UCSD in terms of how people were trying to stay safe. In terms of the way that technologies are being used to kind of identify and target activists, that's a question where it's well, we see the technology, but it's we don't get to see inside of where these technologies are being used. So I don't really have an answer to that question. I'm sure that they will be, because why wouldn't they be? with the encampment at UCSD and the community that formed around the encampment, doing daily teach-ins and art and chanting and all that kind of stuff, some of the surveillance that was happening was non-technological. The student affairs staff was told that they had to go out and start taking pictures of people around the encampment with their iPads. And half of the staff said on day 2, hell no, we're not going to do that. Or there was counter protester groups that were live streaming and coming and taking pictures of people and then submitting those pictures to campus administration, using the campus administration as the police. Well, because the campus administration is literally the boss of our UC police department. So, everyday kind of social surveillance is actually a really big deal too. And I think that those examples kind of make it super illustrate in a super obvious way the way the police, it's not just about the police, it's about who the police are weaponized by and for what purposes, whether it's property owners or white supremacist people in their suburbs, or counter protesters who want to unleash the punishment bureaucracy on those they don't agree with to kind of slow them down or to inspire fear or to chill their speech. So some of the safety and security practices around the encampment were wearing masks, wearing sunglasses, so that if there's because there's all these video cameras around campus, and those video cameras I've learned actually recently all get streamed into a central supercomputing center where object anomaly detection software looks to and sends alerts when weird video is detected, which is basically ShotSpotter for video. But by wearing face masks and by wearing sunglasses, people can make themselves a little bit harder to identify and track through those videos. People were actually not using their real names around the encampment. People had kind of these chosen names so that, and didn't also tried not to keep lists of real names so that those lists, real names can be overheard by people who are, infiltrating, or they can be picked up by the microphones around campus or shot spotters. If you're taking lists of names on a Google form or something like that, police can go and subpoena that the information from that Google form. Using a search engine like DuckDuckGo, because if you're searching for how to put up an encampment or encampment safety rules or something like that. Now that encampments are apparently putatively illegal, where I live, law enforcement can send Google a keyword search where they're show me everyone who is searching for this thing within this geography and their IP address and whatever other information you have about them. So they don't even need, I'm not sure they need a warrant for that, but in any case, they don't need a warrant to look at the video streams on our campus. Police can look at it whenever they want. So those are some security culture things. And we had a thing where we were doing a teach-in on computer security at the public library. Counter protester saw the flyer and was I know there's going to be illegal things done here and I want this shut down. And the librarians were great about pushing back on that, but they also warned us. And so having a teach-in in a public space where you don't know how what people say can be used to endanger them, what we ended up doing, well, one, we should have had an RSVP so that we could turn people away. But what we ended up doing, because we hadn't done an RSVP for the teach-in, was to say, all right, we're going to watch this movie together. Nobody say anything that you wouldn't say in front of a police officer. But for the discussion section, go off with people that you know well and discuss with them. And if you don't know anybody, then you can talk to one of the organizers or something like that, and so to create safe spaces in a time where people are really being kind of attacked using police, using administrative discipline. So those are just some on the ground things that have been happening for us lately. I love to learn from what else people are seeing in your spaces.
Thank you. No. I was just going to say that those are really great concrete examples, but Granite, go for it.
Oh, I just want to respond to that because sometimes I just think we need tech workers and very tech savvy people to think about us, think about, because they know what's coming down the pike also of just, my kid just is on a trip right now, and I was like, you need to probably download, one of those programs to protect your computer while you're traveling and stuff. But there's things that we could really use. We don't need, like, I got mad. I live in the Bay Area, and I get very mad about the tech industry because it's like, I don't need another app to do these ridiculous things. I don't need 5 options to order food or whatever. We need things that will help protect us from, surveillance tech coming in. We need a lot of stuff, right? And I have had a close friend who was concerned about Israeli NSO, on their phone. And so somebody very specialized came to her house and took her phone and did a whole thing with it. And it's like, we need more of those people. we need tech on our side, not just to defend against it. But anyway, I just wanted to, as someone who's in tech, to just say we need things to combat tech, but we need that expertise besides DuckDuckGo. But all these things, like, we need smarter tech. And it used to be cool, this whole tech industry, and it's become, a villainous. It doesn't have to be that way. A villainous industry.
Can I just add to that? So, like, what happened with our teach-in was that a group of, basically, like, when the organizers who posted the teach-in, like, I didn't have capacity to organize it. I was just like, hey, I'll support you. I'll, like, show up. But when they put up that flyer and, like, circulated it through their networks, there were, like, 5 tech workers that, like, people hadn't met who, like, showed up. So, like, having that kind of thing can also help, like, build those connections with the tech specialized folks. But then the tech specialized folks are often in the United States, like, are like, like, they're often from, like, more privileged backgrounds, not always. And so they need to also be learning, like, from what people, in communities that are not less techy know about how these institutions actually work. So it's, like, a good combination if both sides come prepared to, like, help and listen.
Tawana, do you have anything to add here?
I was wondering if there's another question.
Yeah, there is another question, and we're coming up on time here, so I think that this may be the last question that we'll get to. But one of our participants was wondering if it would be possible to kind of more explicitly draw the connection between these technologies and, for example, the bombing campaign in Gaza, and how these technologies are interrelated. And within posing that question, also kind of ask something that I hear a lot of people asking, which is, is AI inherently bad? Is it inevitable that this is going to be the use of AI technologies, or is it possible to create something better out of these? So I'm kind of melding these two questions together as we need to wrap up here quickly. But if you all want to go ahead and quickly give your closing thoughts with that question in mind, and maybe we'll go in reverse order of how we have been going, because Tawana, you weren't able to share thoughts on the last question. So maybe we'll start with you, Tawana.
Yeah, I'll just say there's definitely some direct connections, right? A lot of our law enforcement officers are trained by Israeli military, and there's a lot of back and forth sharing around which technologies have been most useful to either maintain the border or contain quote unquote undesirable communities, marginalized communities. And so, you see situations where, like, robot dogs are used at the borders, right? And then you see, and now increasingly at checkpoints, and now you see law enforcement agencies deploying robot dogs. There's one that we know of in Michigan, and we also know of robot dogs being used in Detroit. In addition to that, drone technologies that are weaponized. There was actually proposals in the U.S. to arm drones with guns and put them in schools. And so we're seeing, James Baldwin, the late James Baldwin said that, if they come for you in the morning, they'll be coming for me that night. And so that's the way we have to look at it. Where there is a marginalized community anywhere or an oppressed community anywhere, those same harmful technologies will be leveraged and exploited if we don't resist them. And then finally, I will say, as far as AI for good, I have not moved into the field of trusting a technology that is in its experimentation phase that was leveraged across society while proven harms were being invisibilized. And so I live in Detroit, where half of the misidentification cases using biometric surveillance, specifically facial recognition technology in the United States, come out of my city. And so it's going to take a lot of convincing for me to see that there is a greater, that I should lean more towards trusting this technology than the skepticism that I've chosen to deploy.
Yeah, no, fair enough, fair enough. Lily, let's pass it to you.
I'm not sure how much I have to add there. Like, I agree with all of that. I think, like here in the US border, like Elbit Technologies is a company that sells like security kind of optical systems. And that Elbit is an Israeli company so Anthony Lowenstein's book, The Palestine Laboratory, gives lots of examples of how Palestine gets used as a test bed for Israeli companies, but also other companies that are developing like optical scanning technologies, face recognition checkpoints, identification management systems. And then these technologies are getting exported for use for like monitoring refugees at borders, like the one that I live by on unceded Kumi land, and like European like migration management, and he connects those technologies to an ethno-nationalist Netanyahuism ideology that he talks about, where you kind of build your you build your like political strength through creating like a need for an ethno-nationalist state that has this need to kind of surveil and monitor and keep out. So I would recommend that book for some of the concrete connections. In the computer science discipline that I studied in, there were like lots of folks who were like Israelis, and not all Israelis. There's a lot of Israelis who are incredibly critical of the occupation and of their country's practices, but there's a lot of folks who are like been in IDF and like did a lot of computing technology development there, and then go off and do startups or become computer science professors. And so like in computer science, it can be really hard to like have these conversations because people have, there's a lot of like emotions and investment people have in like building their careers out of building these kinds of AI technologies. That's a concrete leak that comes up for me. I'll leave it to Granite.
Yeah, go ahead, Granite.
I had something and then I left my brain, but obviously there's a very strong relationship with tech here and tech in Palestine. So much has been developed in Israel by that special unit. 6,800, is that the Israeli IDF, former IDF technology? I think 50% of Israel's exports, 8,200, thanks, is technology. We just have to look at it. And one thing that someone brought up with me when I was working on this on ShotSpotter before is like, why are we looking to tech as the answer for many things, right? Just in general, why are we looking for tech as an answer? And if anyone's been put on hold for 45 minutes trying to get something that, a regular person in 1978 could have helped you with, then you understand that AI is, it's not really a good or bad, but it's messing us up, and it's taking the human response of what we want and need that makes us able to respond to a genocide and Gaza, the fact that they could blame a technology that they they messed up because of a technology, that there's another, the technology that's being used is only as effective as the people who are using it. So in the hands of racist police, that technology is going to be weaponized. It is not a neutral thing that we all have access to, that there's some kind of, BS neutral playing field, right? It is definitely in the wrong hands, a weapon and deadly. And it also puts an arm's distance and dehumanizes us further for people who are already seen not as fully human. So I'm very concerned about our futures, but I do think, and I do want to mention one thing that we're working on, which is and it's empowerchange.org/ gotta give a URL, investigate ShotSpotter, because one of the things that has happened is, because of the work of the people in this panel and others, like, we have been able to take this quote security technology and turn it on its head in a very short amount of time, where it is seen as surveillance technology, or it used to be seen as something else, like security technology. So we have to be vigilant. We have something, there is, because of this leak to Wired, there was an article that showed all of the places where ShotSpotter was in the United States. And it's like 70%. It's just like clearer than anything. Like, we all have to work together on this, but this 70% are in Black, brown, and poor neighborhoods. It's obvious, it's clear as day. So Markey and Elizabeth Warren, they are, they did an open letter to, the Homeland Security to say, we need to investigate ShotSpotter across the country for violating our civil rights. And so using the laws that we have, civil rights protections, and starting to see it less as a privacy and rights and more as like, are these weapons, in the hand, do we have a human rights lens for AI? And can they use it if it's violating our human rights worldwide? Like, can we start looking at it from a humanitarian, human rights, weaponizing, war crime? Like, is this technology a war crime? How is it related to the ICC calling, what I mean? We're just not separate from that, right? Anyway, and as they're exporting it here, and we're exporting 2,000-pound bombs to be triggered by racist technology in Palestine, then, we just have to stay vigilant. We have to take the opportunities and think very, very large around it to stop it. Or we're just going to be at every city hall. Well, I mean, we have to do that anyway, but we also have to think big in these campaigns. And that's.
Thank you. Such important points. And this is the advantage of being the last session of the day. We get to run over because there's not a session after us, but thank you for all of those for sticking with us through such an important conversation, and especially for those of you in Palestine, as I know it is quite late for you. And just want to draw to Lily's link tree that I think is such an important note to end on. We Keep Us Safe, resources there for ensuring that you're an active part of keeping your community safe. So many important resources were shared on this panel. Thank you for all of the comments that you've made and for supporting us in this really important conversation. And thank you for all of you who have joined on day one of the Palestine Digital Activism Forum, and please come back and participate in our interactive workshops tomorrow during day two. So thank you very much.
تحت كل حجرة وظلت كل شجرة بشوف ذكريات ستي وجدي، فكل ما تسألوني انتي مين رح أحكي لكم عن قوتهم وكيف أحفادهم صامدين.
لقد وصلنا إلى ختام اليوم الأول من منتدى فلسطين للنشاط الرقمي لعام 2024. نتقدم بجزيل الشكر لجميع المشاركين والحضور، ونشكر جميع المتحدثين والمتحدثات الذين يعملون بلا كلل لبناء مستقبل يتيح للجميع الوصول العادل والمتساوي إلى حقوقهم الرقمية بغض النظر عن العرق أو الدين أو الجنس. وبالتأكيد نشكر جميع الشركاء والممولين الذين كان لهم دورا أساسيا في المنتدى لهذا العام. الحضور الكريم، نأمل أن تستمروا في مشاركتكم القيمة في حراكنا نحو حماية الحقوق الرقمية الفلسطينية، ليس فقط للفلسطينيين بل أيضا على الصعيد العالمي، لا سيما في ظل المنعطف الخطر بفعل تطور الذكاء الاصطناعي. معا يمكننا العمل نحو ضمان استخدام تقنيات الذكاء الاصطناعي بشكل مسؤول وأخلاقي ولتحقيق تغيير إيجابي وملموس. نذكركم بأن يوم غد هو اليوم الثاني من منتدى فلسطين للنشاط الرقمي، حيث سيتم استضافة ورشات عمل يقدمها مدربون ومدربات متخصصون في مجالات متعددة حول تحليل المعلومات ومكافحة التضليل التكنولوجي والسياسي، هذا بالإضافة إلى مجالات أخرى عن دور الذكاء الاصطناعي في تحسين الحياة اليومية وحماية الخصوصية وحقوق الإنسان. نتطلع بشغف لرؤيتكم في جلساتنا غدا، وإلى اللقاء.
And with that, we conclude our first day of the Palestine Digital Activism Forum. A big thank you to everyone who joined us today, and a special thank you to all of our speakers who work tirelessly towards a future where everyone has a fair and equitable access to their digital rights, regardless of race, religion, or gender. Lastly, we thank all our partners and donors who played a vital role in PDAF 2024. Together, we can work towards ensuring that AI technologies are used responsibly and ethically to effect positive change. To all of you who joined, we hope that you'll continue to join us in our movement to address digital rights violations, not just for Palestinians, but also globally, especially during this critical juncture in the development of AI technologies. We'd like to remind you that tomorrow marks the second day of the Palestine Digital Activism Forum, where workshops will be led by specialised trainers in various fields. The workshops will cover topics such as data analysis, combating technological and political misinformation, as well as the role of artificial intelligence in improving daily life, protecting privacy and safeguarding human rights. We look forward to seeing you in our sessions tomorrow. Until then, take care and goodbye.
تحت كل حجرة وظلت كل شجرة بشوف ذكريات ستي